Hello and welcome back to Cinematic Venom and a brand new series on this channel called Film Theory, where we take a look at a popular theory in a film and try to really break down how plausible it is and exactly what would have to happen for this theory to actually make sense. And what better way to start than with Home Alone and Saw. In 1990, we all welcomed Home Alone into the world. The charming classic Christmas tale about 8-year-old Kevin McAllister, played by Macaulay Culkin, who gets accidentally left behind by his family who are going away on vacation for the holidays. During their absence, Kevin's house gets targeted by the Wet Bandits, two bumbling burglars, Harry and Marv, played by Joe Pesci and Daniel Stern. It's then up to Kevin to use whatever's at his disposal to protect himself and his home from the criminals until his family is able to return to him. A charming enough film that most agree is a must-watch in almost every house at Christmas. But what if I were to tell you that Kevin grew up to have a much more sinister adulthood? Home Alone 2 followed 2 years later, which follows the exact same plot, the same kid, the same burglars, and everything is basically the same, except now it's in New York. This was the last we saw of Kevin McAllister, except for Home Alone 4. But there is a popular fan theory that Kevin McAllister actually grew up to become horror movie icon Jigsaw.
That I'm Jigsaw. That Kevin McAllister grew up to be Jigsaw from Saw. And that's how he learned.
I never heard that one.
Yeah, I've heard that one.
In 2004, we were introduced to the first Saw film, and for 7 years straight his story was told. A cancer patient named John Kramer, played by Tobin Bell, was disgusted when his cancer treatment was denied, while others who were otherwise healthy didn't seem to appreciate their luck and good health. To make them truly become grateful for their lives, John, along with the help of others, would capture these people and put them in dangerous traps, forcing them to fight for survival and ultimately appreciate their lives by the end of it if they even survived it at all. Now you're probably wondering, how on earth does Home Alone actually connect to Saw, and how is this theory even remotely possible? So let's dive into it. The first Home Alone features Kevin using traps on Harry and Marv to protect his home, and there's no ulterior motive. He seems to have fun inflicting the pain, but it's nothing too sinister just yet. However, in its sequel, he clearly seems to enjoy the torture a lot more. They're in the middle of the Big Apple when he discovers that Harry and Marv are now trying to steal from a children's charity on Christmas Eve.
You can mess with a lot of things. Can't mess with kids on Christmas.
Kevin not only goes out of his way to lure them into an abandoned house for the physical abuse, but he even says things like,
"Nice night for a neck injury."
Several of these traps are a lot more extreme than the previous film and would most certainly murder someone. Electrocution, fire, bricks to the face, explosions. It's very clear that Kevin is enjoying putting them through this pain, much like Jigsaw, who would often spy on the traps he's putting people in. Kevin even takes joy in tricking the pizza guy into believing that he just heard someone being gunned down, which is definitely a Jigsaw-like trait. Kevin takes way too much pleasure in doing it. In fact, throughout both of the original two Home Alone movies, Kevin shows a lack of control with his temper. His brother Buzz will pick on him and he'll attack him without warning. Considering the size difference between the two, Kevin would still somehow overpower his brother, and one of these outbursts was simply over him missing out on pizza. Jigsaw would later put people in traps for the most timid of offences, and seemed to lose his temper quite easily as well. He would snap at people, but he'd also put people in traps for having depression, or for smoking cigarettes, or even earning a living by taking pictures. Kevin's mother would make him feel unloved, and he would attempt to emotionally manipulate her, and he would spy on his neighbours or random people in public. All things that the later Jigsaw would become notorious for. He even uses a voice-changing recorder in the sequel, much like John Kramer would do in the Saw films.
Howdy, Jim. This is Peter McAllister, the father.
Up until now, you've simply sat in the shadows.
Kevin would even record his uncle's voice and use it to his own advantage in Home Alone 2.
Get out of here, you nosy little pervert, or I'm gonna slap you silly!
Something that other variations of the character also did. Recording people was always a thing for him. If you look at the similarities between the traps, you'll also notice that there's one major one. In both Home Alone and Saw, the traps usually always revolve around what the victim does. The victim nearly always has to activate the trap themselves, whether it be Harry or Marv falling for the bait and walking into a certain room following Kevin, or simply activating a decoy. Or in Saw, a victim leaning forward or falling for a premeditated section of the game to activate it. Kevin uses fire a few times in his traps, even burning Harry's head to the scalp, while Jigsaw uses candles to practically incinerate an entire man, which could actually link back to a childhood fear of his. A frequent occurrence in the original Home Alone film is that Kevin is terrified of the furnace. He even imagines it coming to life several times. In Saw 2, a furnace is actually used as a booby trap, which which ends up killing one of the players in the game. It is possible that Jigsaw, if he is indeed Kevin McAllister, reverted back to one of his childhood fears. Kevin also likes to booby trap staircases a lot, whether it be making them slippery with ice or putting nails or tar on it to trick the burglars, specifically nailing Marv in the foot, while in Saw 2 the entire staircase is rigged to collapse under the police force, sabotaging them and slicing their legs. In Saw 2 we see Jigsaw's hideout, and it does bear a strong resemblance to Kevin's own basement in the original Home Alone. The layout of the room, the staircase, and even the same furnace, it all looks similar. But there's more. In Home Alone, Kevin first discovers that he's been left behind and wanders down into the basement searching for his family, and you can actually see a clown mask at the front of the frame, which bears a strong resemblance to Jigsaw's later iconic doll face. Furthermore, in December of 2015, 25 years after the original movie, Macaulay Culkin finally reprised his role as Kevin, taking part in an unofficial spin-off sequel in the form of a short film in which Kevin was so traumatized by the neglect and abuse by his family that he now happily puts people in disturbing traps. Now this all might seem pointless because yet another Home Alone movie did come out at the end of 2021. Kevin doesn't appear, but his brother Buzz does, and Kevin is mentioned.
He called in the 289 to mess with me. The idiot does it every year.
Which is completely illegal and shows that Kevin isn't against breaking the law. Even before he was left home alone, Kevin's family neglected him and bullied him. Almost every single member of his family seemed to have some kind of disdain for the boy, which would most certainly add some psychological trauma, and that's even without two criminals chasing and trying to kill him. Could it have scarred the boy so much, considering it happened twice, that he may have actually grown up to become a serial killer? Considering most serial killers do suffer abuse and neglect as a child. The theory is that Kevin was so traumatized he skipped town after the events of the first two films and changed his name, becoming John Kramer. It's believed that he enjoyed the New York experience so much he moved from Chicago out to the East Coast, possibly to Pennsylvania where the Saw films are set. Both John and Kevin have blue eyes, both have blonde hair, and both even have a similar jawline. But let's just see how similar the personality traits are. In the original two Home Alone films, there are two characters in which people are afraid of. Now sure, Kevin is initially also scared of them, but he also becomes the only person who reaches out and talks to them. In conversation, he finds out that the old man has isolated from his son and blames himself for the falling out. While in the sequel, a lady is now homeless after a bad breakup and distances herself from others. In both films, Kevin gives them advice and tries to reach them emotionally, guiding them into the right path, which seems to help. The old man reconciles with his son and the woman decides to become more outgoing. Not too unsimilar to Jigsaw, whose entire motif, at least in his mind, is to help people become better versions of themselves, to learn from their mistakes and amend their own issues. Could it be so unlikely that this man started doing this at a young age? However, what goes against this theory is that Kevin is clearly 10 years old in Home Alone 2, and then somehow in just 12 years time he becomes a much older man in his 50s or 60s. So this calls into question, when do the movies take place? The first two Home Alone films make no acknowledgement of the year they're set in, and since there's only two, we may have to assume that they take place in the year they were released, making Kevin 10 years old in 1992. Now there are 9 Saw films, at least at the time of this video, but only 8 in which John Kramer actually appears. So this does give us enough room to try to find out a year that they are set in. The movies never directly address when they take place. They often acknowledge how much time has passed, so the first movie came out in 2004 and Amanda's in a flashback trap which is 5 months earlier, making it either earlier that same year or late 2003. Although the phone in the movie clearly says that it's 2001, so they can't make up their mind. In Saw 4, which takes place at the same time as Saw 3, just run with it. 6 months have passed since the second film, as Donnie Wahlberg's character was held captive. But the sequels constantly go back and forth with time to show us John becoming Jigsaw, and others helping him. The writers have come out to claim that his tests and games only spanned around 2 years. So if the first Saw film is set the year it came out, John would have become the serial killer in 2002, which would have made it impossible for Kevin to be Jigsaw, as he would have only been 20 years old. But remember when I said the film never directly acknowledges what year they're set in? That doesn't mean they don't subtly do. In Saw 4, we get a flashback to a man named Cecil unintentionally injuring Jigsaw's wife and causing her to miscarry their child. For revenge, John kidnaps Cecil and we see a festival going on for the Chinese Year of the Pig. Now this is important because the Year of the Pig is the 12th yearly cycle of the Chinese zodiac. So when does this take place? Well, it means that Saw 4 either took place in 1995 when Kevin would have been just 13, or 2007 when he would have been 25. And yeah, I love Tape and Bell, but he isn't past passing for 25 anytime soon. And this poses a dilemma. Saw 4 did indeed come out in 2007, so maybe it is set the same year it was released. However, this scene is a flashback, and this was just as John was becoming Jigsaw. So this would mean his death in Saw 3 would have been 2 years later, making it 2009 when Kevin would be 27. So that's it, right? Case closed! Kevin can't be Jigsaw! Well, weirdly enough, in Jigsaw, the 2017 reboot, the film has 2 timelines going on at once. The main trap is actually 10 years earlier, which a brief glimpse of a computer screen shows us is in fact 2007. In present day, it's consistently said that this trap was 10 years ago. That's worth noting because the police also say it's been a decade since John's death. But how can this be? When we see John, he's perfectly healthy as he was in the other flashbacks, like with Cecil, as he was just becoming Jigsaw. The cancer hasn't taken its toll yet, so we're led to believe that this flashback isn't actually 10 years ago. It has to be around 12 years ago when he was still relatively healthy, making the flashback 2007, which coincides with the Cecil flashback, and his death 2009, which also coincides with Saw 4's narrative, but making it impossible for Jigsaw to take place 10 years after John's death. The film came out in 2017, but it will be set in 2019. John's dead at this point, so that's irrelevant, but it seems unlikely that Kevin could possibly become Jigsaw. In fact, if Saw 4 was indeed set in the year of the pig, and we're assuming Kevin McAllister grows up to become Jigsaw in his late 50s and early 60s, going by the cycle rotation of the Chinese zodiac calendar, Kevin became John, who then became Jigsaw at the age of 61 years old, in the year 2043. However, Saw films have been known to mess with timelines a lot in the past. Jigsaw is also set 10 years earlier at the same time as 10 years later. Saw 3 and 4 take place at the same time, and even the later sequels go back and forth with time travel more than James Cameron. So this brings forth an extra theory. What if Jigsaw was a time traveller? I'm trying to make this theory work. I mean, let's break down some of the things that John does in the films. His entire MO consists of predetermining human action, but a lot of the time it is beyond impossible. In Saw 4, John somehow knew he was going to die and was able to predict Amanda's entire actions, therefore planning an extra game after his death which takes place at the same time as the events of 3. Either Jigsaw has been through time and seen all of this unfold before, or he is a master psychic, which seems more probable. Throughout the series, we get multiple flashbacks to John planning ahead to extreme capabilities. The series has often gone back and rewrote history based on who was helping Jigsaw at the time. Firstly, it's Amanda, then it's Detective Hoffman, then it's Dr. Gordon, and then it's that guy from Jigsaw, and then Chris Rock did some crap. But this creates a long list of plot holes. Why would Amanda kidnap a doctor in Saw 3 to remove John's tumour when he allegedly had Dr. Gordon working for him the entire time, and he was far more qualified for the surgery? Why isn't Dr. Gordon around in any of the flashbacks? Why isn't Hoffman seen during some early flashbacks of Amanda? Where the hell is this guy for all of it? The only way these actually make sense is if John, or someone working for John, is in fact going back through time and altering the events of the films. Even the timeline of the films themselves is all over the place, and it's very difficult to actually put them in order. And yeah, maybe Jigsaw can control time, but how does that connect to Kevin McAllister? I mean, he's just a kid and the Home Alone movies never time jump, do they? Yes, they do. Whether or not you consider Home Alone 4 canon, I mean, Buzz does disregard it in the latest film.
We forgot my little brother Kevin. Twice.
But it time jumps as he's 9 years old despite being 10 in Home Alone 2.
I'm 9 years old.
And even if you were to believe that it was a direct sequel to the original and took place between 1 and 2, and we're to assume Home Alone was set in the year of its release in 1990, this one would have had to be set in 91. But the technology shown clearly is far too advanced to be from the 90s. Furthermore, everything has changed. Harry and Marv have gone their separate ways, and Marv is now married, which isn't even mentioned in Home Alone 2, so it's not even a prequel either. Furthermore, all of Kevin's other siblings have vanished, and all that remains are his brother Buzz and his sister Megan. The rest of his family have disappeared, and there's no explanation. It's almost as if someone went through time and altered the course of things, disrupting the entire timeline. But even if you were to disregard Home Alone 4 as not being canon, it happens in the first 2 as well. In the original, Kevin clearly says that he is 8 years old.
I'm 8 years old.
But in the sequel,
I'm 10 years old.
He has somehow jumped to 10. Now sure, there is a 2-year gap between films, but Home Alone 2 makes a point to constantly mention that only 1 year has passed.
He was left at home by accident last year.
And it's not like Kevin could have had an extra birthday between them, as they're both set at Christmas. How could Kevin jump from 8 to 10 in just a single year? Unless he can alter time. Saw creator James Wan has actually showed support for this theory, so it all depends on you and whether or not you think it actually holds any weight. Jaws 4. I put Jaws 4. In Jaws 4. In Jaws 4, John somehow knew this.